Live. All right, what's up, y'all? It is K-Rod here. I'm back with a good live stream today. Um, I'm gonna put the link out for anyone that wants to come in and chat about this. But we're going to be talking about Jake Paul's, I think, recent criticism towards, I believe, Canelo Alvarez. For those of you that don't know, Jake Paul, he had I guess like a bit of words to say about Canelo Alvarez's recent fight against Avni Yildirim. Uh, I think he was well in the right for doing what he had to do. The only thing that I think Jake Paul really had not looked into was just simply that Canelo, he's been doing what the wrong things for his career, and there's more to what Jake Paul had to say, but he did a good job just simply stating that Canelo Alvarez is not fighting the best competition, and he needs to basically step it up at this point. I think most of us can basically agree that Canelo Alvarez is at a level of his career. I think most that he can make himself a better athlete if he were to just fight contemporaries that should have been out of his resume to complete his legacy. So I think that's critical to talk about. I think Jake Paul made a good point. As much as I don't really respect Jake Paul, just simply because people would say he's destroying the sport of boxing, but I think from an economical point of view, he's doing everything right for the sport, because even though Jake Paul is not the type to really make it, a career for his boxing, I guess like for his boxing lifestyle, I don't see Jake Paul becoming a world champion, which I mean, it's possible if he really wants to do it. He's only like what, 23, 22. So he's very young in the sport, but it's just that if Jake Paul is making all the right, comments and arguments against fighters that are not doing their job to become the best fighter in their division, then there has to be some form of corruption and some form of behavioral issues within these fighters that use a lot of excuses in boxing to not fight their contemporaries, because we're now seeing it with a lot of guys in this really retarded younger generation of fighters that don't really have too much to really talk about other than making up drama to not fight their better competition. And I think the problem is that a lot of people just really think that boxers today are doing the same thing what boxers back then are doing, and that's not really true. It's like there's plenty of boxers that have a much different caliber back then to the boxers today that have done you know like literally jack shit nothing compared to what the fighters did back then. Like Sugar Ray Robinson was like fighting like what, every other month or every other week. I mean, he had well over like 100 fights, and it pretty much shows like the pure, softness of boxing. Like, fighters are just not real fighters no more. And compared to the NBA, like the NBA has always been a ever growing sport, but you've never seen not one time in the sport of basketball where the best are not facing the best. For boxing, boxing seems to be the only sport where there's political divide, where people don't want to fight each other because, oh, he's black, oh, he's too short, oh, his style doesn't meet my style, or her style doesn't meet my style. So you can understand like the evils and corruptions in boxing that makes the boxing world really bland and cut dry. I've kind of made so many points on this on other people's channels. Shout out to Aki TV, BFTB, and Blue Blood, or or Blue Blood Sports TV. Like I've commented on his channel, but he's but the like obviously those those channels are good enough to promote real boxing that actually commit to making the sport better. And I think that's where more of it needs to be promoted because there's a lot of things in boxing that's not giving it's a bigger popularity to rise because like a lot of these casuals, I understand like they're not really educated in boxing, and most of them are pretty stupid because they don't really understand the true lineages of the sport of boxing. But if you're going to become a boxer, you need to face your contemporaries. That's the number one thing in any sport. You don't just play boxing. Nobody doesn't play boxing. That's the number one rule. You don't play boxing. Same thing with wrestling. You don't play wrestling. So with a sport like boxing being incredibly dangerous for anyone to die in the ring, it's a very risky sport for you to get into if you're not knowing what's going on behind closed doors. And for fighters like Canelo Alvarez, that's trying to take an easy way out to become the only Mexican fighter to become undisputed for the 168-pound division, which he could have done it at 154. He could have done it at 160. But for some odd reason, no, he doesn't want to do that because he's afraid of the evil, scary contemporaries by the ways of black people and Hispanic people like David Benavidez, Jamal Charlo, Arislandi Lara, in which he never gave him a rematch when he fought Lara for the 154-pound title, I believe, for the WBA or the WBC. Either way, like Canelo Alvarez has not really fought top tier competition. His skill set is mainly around you sitting in front of him, and he's able to just whack back and forth with you, and he's able to use that type of style where it only fits him with a guy that doesn't move around in the ring. Because a person like Floyd Mayweather, who did move in the ring, beat the living crap out of Canelo, and Canelo knew that he cannot beat a guy like that. So Canelo needs to have a style that's only made for him, that's tailor made. He wants to he wants to fight guys that are basically a negative 5 to 10,000 ratio odds of him winning every single time, and that's not going to bring the best out of Canelo. If Canelo wants to make himself the best Mexican fighter, like every single other Mexican that I've watched ever since I was growing up, Francisco Finito Vargas, right? I might have gotten that last name wrong, but Marco Barrera, Eric Morales, and as much as I don't respect him, Julio Cesar Chavez. If you want to follow that bloodline, I would say you need to prove yourself a lot more right now to fight every single tough fight that you have been avoiding. And Jake Paul, he's not wrong about that. He's right about that. And people will always say, "Oh, well, Jake Paul, he's never been around in boxing for that long. He's only done it for 2 years." But yeah, he's making a good point. And when the facts are true, the truth will always come out. Canelo Alvarez has been in boxing for 18 years. This guy has been fighting since he was 15. Why is it that nobody never gave a shit about him when he was fighting in Mexico? But then somehow, someway, when he comes out here to America, the only reason why he's only relevant is because he's he's being promoted by all these promoters, i.e. Eddie Hearn, and then oh man, I forgot who else, but I'll probably just go with Eddie Hearn because Eddie Hearn basically hyped him up. So it was like a waste of money from day one. But he was only popular when he lost to Floyd Mayweather because Floyd Mayweather was being told by all these other people that was connected with Canelo to say, "Hey, Floyd Mayweather, you should fight Canelo Alvarez. He's such a good fighter. He's only 23 years old and he holds I think he held like a belt at the time. I'm not too sure. But basically, Floyd Mayweather was like, "Who the hell is this guy? I don't know who he is." And remind you, Canelo fought on Floyd Mayweather's undercards before he even got a fight with Floyd. So Floyd Mayweather basically told him, if you want to fight me, you better go through these two people to come, to come see me. And those two people were Mr. Austin Trout and Erislandy Lara. So why is it that Canelo, when he fought those two black guys and he damn near lost those two fights, why is it that he will never face those type of fighters again? It's because Canelo knows his skills. He is not a top fighter when you're fighting guys that have athletic ability, and he doesn't make those adjustments to get away from those type of slick fighters that could actually hurt you and hit you at spots that you don't see. And I'm pretty sure Canelo, he's juicing too. He's been caught for drug tests, failures. He's taken steroids. So, what makes you think Canelo is that good of a fighter? All these Mexican Canelo dick riders that want to say, "Oh yeah, man, he's so good. He does everything right. He be fighting all the best fighters." Yeah, he's fighting guys that are like unranked, or he fights them at a disadvantage where he makes sure that the fight is made on short notice, or he tries to make sure that there's certain stipulations that needs to be met for the fight. I guess like when it comes to contract, negotiations where he tries to get, like the lion's share of money, but like when it comes to his opponents, I'm pretty sure, the fights that he's had as of recent were just not equal payouts. He tries to make it seem like he's such a good pay per view star, but when you compare him to like Errol Spence, Errol Spence has been making way more pay per view buys than Canelo Alvarez. If Canelo Alvarez were to fight contemporaries and actually beat them, he would be probably neck and neck with Errol Spence, but he's not doing that. With him fighting Avni Yildirim, which is a very controversial fight that I've already criticized, I would I would assume that Canelo needs to stop the bullshit and he needs to fight, Charlo and all these tougher fighters. So the only way that Canelo could really save his career is that he needs to start fighting these guys. And I don't think he will, because I think Canelo is just going to be a bitch, and so be it. But it's like, I'm just going to look at Canelo as one of the biggest pussies in boxing. And I think, but the reason why he's going to still be like that is because I think he has that Floyd Mayweather defeated syndrome, where, when you lose to Floyd Mayweather, you just can't think about losing anymore. So what Canelo does is that I'm going to cherry pick every single fighter that I come across to make my life easier, so I don't have to get my ass beat for any bigger, tougher fights. And even when when my fights are mandatories against guys that are way better than me, I'm still going to avoid them by requesting the WBC French fries belt whenever I use it to my advantage to get away from bigger fights. So you already know what Canelo's trying to do, and I think what he's trying to do. I could be wrong on this. Maybe Canelo he might have a different form of energy, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Um, I think what Canelo's trying to do, he's trying to go for undisputed. So he has two fights left. He has Billy Joe Sanders or Billy Ho, and then once he beats Billy Ho, he's going to face Caleb Plant, which I think Plant is going to beat him, which I would hope so. But if he does beat Plant, he's just gonna quit. I won't be surprised if Canelo just gives up all the belts when David Benavidez becomes his mandatory, because David Benavidez is going to be appointed by the WBC. He has to fight for the mandatory for the WBC. So if Canelo has balls, which I would hope so, he should be fighting David Benavidez. But if that's not going to happen, I think Charlo would be the next option. I just don't think that Canelo has any pride in his heritage to prove that he is one of the best Mexican fighters. Because at this time, Canelo, he's just he's just trying to take advantage of everything. You know what I'm saying? Like he doesn't really care about what people think about him, and he knows that. But he even said prior to the Abney Yildirim fight, I don't care what the fans think. I just care that I have people get inside the ring with me so I can move on with my career. So it's like, obviously I kind of paraphrase that, but it was just pretty much like, simply pointed out that Canelo Alvarez he doesn't give a crap about his fans. You know, all these Mexicans that say that he's such a great fighter, he's doing everything for our Mexican people and the culture. He's not doing jack shit for y'all. And I guarantee you, like, if Canelo, if he was Puerto Rican or if he was black, he would never get the same energy. His fans would be talking all the smack about him, and his career would be tarnished because I just know from that angle, like I'm not just saying like due to racial complexity, you have like political protection through your fans. But I mean, yes, I'm not going to disassociate from the hopeless fighters and coincidentalist fighters. I think that is a thing in boxing. Same thing with the NBA and probably some other sports, but particularly for boxing, boxing does have a racist background with protecting fighters that are not that good, that are on the hope list. They have political protection through promoters and through the commissions or whatever, but it really determines on the type of fights that are being made for those fighters, and then what type of cheating is going on behind closed doors that's allowing the corruption of boxing to continue. But for Canelo's case, he's using anything as an excuse to say why I can't fight this guy, like Andre. Oh, I don't want to fight him because his style is too boring. What do you mean too boring? Oh, translation. He's too good because he moves and he knows how to hit you at spots that you don't see. And by the way, Andre is slick, so when he catches you with a combination that makes you basically dismantled. He's a defensive pressure counterpuncher, and that's what Andre does. He doesn't need to come into you. He goes backwards because he knows what you're gonna do to him. He basically outreads Canelo's punches, and he could literally break him down to the point where he would get annihilated. So I think Jake Paul made a great point about that because Canelo, he's been in the sport for 18 years and he's been avoiding these guys and he's not doing anything to shut up all his quote unquote haters or more so critics, because it makes perfect sense why Jake Paul would come out of his way to say that against him. But that is a damn good point. And I'm pretty sure if Canelo was, you know, Puerto Rican or Peruvian and he were to do the same thing, he would just never get away with it because he's not like I think honestly it was just mainly due to the promoter politics that did hype him up, so he automatically got a hopeless position. But if that wasn't the case, then simply Canelo is being protected by his fans and by the media and all these other people that are not being so aggressive towards him to say, you need to fight this guy, you need to fight Charlie, you need to fight Andre, you need to fight all these damn fighters, and you've been ducking them for so many damn years. And now there's even talks that Andre Ward, he might come back and he wants to fight Canelo. So you're like Canelo already knows that he's on a hit list. People want his neck, but it's the pressure from the media and from the fans and the rest of the audiences that are tuning in. And I probably even say this channel, which I only do this for like a hobby for talking about boxing and posting games and whatnot. But it's like I'm not going to be looking into all this crap about what Canelo does on the daily. But the only thing I care about is that Canelo, if he's fighting either of those guys that I mentioned, then I am going to tune in. But until then, no, dude. I'm sorry, Canelo. You are the most trash Mexican fighter out of all Mexican history. And remind you, I was rocking hard for Canelo. Shit, like I was thinking Canelo, yo, would he be like the Mexican version of Miguel Cotto? Or even closer to a Julio Cesar Chavez, Chavez Senior. I think that would have been good, and I would have liked everything that Canelo would have done right if he had real Mexican balls to fight contemporaries. So here's my thing for Canelo: until you fight these guys, I don't want to hear anything from Canelo Alvarez nor his fans because he is an absolute fraud. Jake Paul was not wrong about anything. As much as I don't like Jake Paul, and I think, he's a clown and he's a tool himself, he's promoting himself well in boxing and he's helping the sport. So why can't Canelo do that without Jake Paul's assistance? Because Jake Paul, he was riding heavy with Canelo, but I guess now they're at beef, and Canelo told his I guess like one of his a couple of his team members that were like repping Jake Paul shirts for promoting Ben Askren fight. He said, get the fuck out of here. It's like Canelo knows that he's screwed. Like, if Jake Paul is gonna talk bad about Canelo, then guess what? I'm gonna talk about it. Everybody else is gonna talk about it. So I think what Jake is doing is that he's gonna change like the cultural trend in boxing. And if it is successful, then Canelo Alvarez will not be able to get away with ducking these fighters because he's going to be pressured. And he said, like, I think like a week or two ago or a couple of days ago that he would knock out Charlo in 4 rounds. And he's sick and tired that all these people are telling him to fight Jamal Charlo and he wants to make this fight happen. Okay, but if he is saying all this stuff, why isn't he doing it now? This is why Canelo is an absolute fraud and he's a pathetic liar too. Like we've heard him say that he would beat Floyd Mayweather in a rematch. Like, really? After you got your ass beat by Floyd, you say years later, this is like back in 2019, by the way, he said, I would knock out Floyd in a rematch and I would badly hurt him. And yet you never even wanted to hit him up. Because you want to know why, Canelo? You are afraid of contemporaries that are better than you. You're afraid of the evil, scary, move around type of boxer, like what boxing is, a hit and not get hit sport. You don't like a style that you don't want to meet. And I guarantee you, the way Canelo fought against Avni Yildirim, he would get stopped by Jamal Charlo. All these racist Canelo fans that say that Jamal Charlo, he would get annihilated by Canelo. Why didn't Canelo meet him at 154? Why didn't he meet his brother at 154? Why did Canelo try to fight Ricky Hatton's brother, Matthew Hatton, I believe for the WBC Diamond title or whatever title it was to lead to a championship? Either way, like, Canelo Alvarez is the biggest pussy of all Mexicans. I swear to God, if Miguel Cotto were to do the same thing what he did to Floyd, but he did it to every other black fighter, I would not like him. That's really why I still like Miguel Cotto, because he stepped up. He fought the best, and I was happy that he did fight Floyd because that is what makes a fighter a fighter. Canelo's not a fighter; he's a diva. He's basically a prima donna diva scumbag. He does not want to fight his toughest competition, and he makes all the excuses in the world to avoid it. And he knows damn well that he cannot do the things that he can do if he wasn't given the hopeless protection of boxing politics. So I think that is why Canelo is getting away with these type of things. It could be different for everyone else, but I do believe when it comes to hopeless fighters and coincidentalist fighters, it is mainly due to the racial stigma of the fighters' political support. So, Muhammad Ali, greatest fighter of all time. I don't think he is, in my eyes, but people looked at him as the people's champion. They didn't just look at him as a champion. He was still a champion in and outside the ring. But Muhammad Ali, as good as he was, he still doesn't get the credit that he deserves for what he tried to do for his people and what he tried to do for the sport of boxing. At the time, people hated him. But then now, after, people make so many documentaries about him, but they still don't respect him because those people are the same people that protect fighters that are not good, and they get hyped up, in these ESPN 30 for 30 clips to say, "Oh, this fighter, he was so good. Look at how he punched and look at how he moved and blah blah blah." Like, I used to like Jack Dempsey, but then when I found out that Jack Dempsey, he was a dirty ass cheater, I was happy that he got knocked the fuck out by Gene Tunney. Gene Tunney beat the living crap out of him. At least Gene Tunney, he made history. He did what he had to do. And plus, he fought fair. But for a guy like Jack Dempsey, for him having a history of cheating and almost killing someone in the ring, sounds very familiar, like Tyson Fury. Yeah, those type of people are being hyped up versus fighters on the coincidental or they're not being talked about as a relevant fighter of the past, like the Deontay Wilders of the world or Jack Johnsons of the world, Floyd Pattersons of the world. Those fighters are being disrespected, and for a guy like Canelo to be next in line to ruin the sport and ruin its historical lineages for what it's known for, no, that needs to stop. And I'm not just saying that because I, don't like what's going on due to a fighter's, preferences of who he fights. It's the fact that the corruption is there in boxing and it needs to go. So for Canelo Alvarez, I say this one more time, and I'm pretty sure for anyone that is watching that's associated with Canelo's fan base, you need to tell this motherfucker to start fighting contemporaries. Canelo, I swear to God, if you never had this political protection, you would be thrashed and flamed for boxing. A real Mexican warrior is someone who fights everybody. They fear no man or woman. A real Mexican warrior is someone who cares about his legacy and cares about his people and cares about the fights that he gets into. And he puts all the dedication and all the pride and all the hard work into it. Like a real Mexican warrior is someone who does not let people call them bitches and call them a pussy. Like, Demetrius Andre that called you out and he called you a punta. Yeah, I think you know what that means. But guess what? You should not be letting anyone say that to you. But for Teofimo Lopez, for him to say that Deontay Wilder is a bitch, oh yeah, Deontay Wilder, if he sees Teo in real life, I swear to God, Teo is going to get knocked out by Wilder. Because Wilder, he's not going to let anyone say that to him. But for Canelo to allow Demetrius Andrade to call him out like that, and David Benavidez that called you out too, that is pure disgrace. Oh, I'm not going to fight no more Mexican fighters, but yet you fought two two Mexican fighters, Josecito Lopez and Alfredo Angulo in the past. So the pure hypocrisy of Canelo's fan base and his actions need to go. And I am sick and tired of hearing this man talk because he is an absolute psychopath and he is not doing anything right for boxing. You ain't got no Mexican blood, you got white blood. And I'm not trying to be racist for saying that. It's simply the fact that you don't want to represent your bloodline, and your bloodline has shown that you fought everybody from top to bottom. It does not matter. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care how many times you have to make the excuses to say, who is this guy fought? Canelo fought this guy and he did absolutely great, and this guy's opponent wasn't that good. It does not matter what the boxer's opponent is. It matters that the boxers fight contemporaries. They fight people that are going to give them a 50-50 battle. Like, compare Canelo to Andre Ward. Andre Ward's opponents have been way better compared to Canelo. Canelo will never do anything what the all-time greats did. And remind you, Canelo, he looked up to Muhammad Ali. He looked up to Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. He looked up to black people. What does that tell you? Canelo, he's a fraud. If you look up to black all-time great athletes of boxing, then why can't you bring that same mimic energy of what the all-time greats did to today's boxing? Canelo does not want to do that. He knows that he's not better than all those greats. He knows that he's not better than his contemporaries now. So he's going to make up all the excuses in the world to not fight these guys. And I would really hope he changes his energy, because I want to see Canelo shine and probably say sorry to the fans that used to like you, to make people like me regain your respect, or to make me give you respect again. Canelo doesn't want to do that. He wants to be the biggest idiot in the world, to think that nobody's not looking at what true boxing fans are looking at. that you're fighting a bum that came off of a huge loss 2 years prior to fighting you now. Um, it's absolutely disgusting. And Canelo Alvarez, you are the biggest scumbag in the world. And I'm not going to respect any Mexican like yourself that doesn't even represent his heritage properly. At least Jose Ramirez is fighting Josh Taylor for a 140-pound unification bout for undisputed. But what does Canelo do? He does not fight Charlo to get a belt or to defend his belt against him. He does not fight Andrade, which you could have met him at 160, and you could have met him at 154 for title belt contention. Same thing with Jamal Charlo's brother, Jamel Charlo, and you could have fought so many other guys, but yet you avoid them. So my final message before I get out of here, Canelo Alvarez, you're the biggest bitch ever, and long live the all-time greats in boxing. Get rid of this damn corruption. This crap needs to go, man. And I'm just going to sign off to say that to become a great in any sport, you have to put your life, liberty, and blood into that sport. No matter what sport you play, you have to face the best. Because to be a legend in any sport, that is what is required for you to be known for the future. So that's all that I got to say. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. To hell with Canelo, to hell with the WBC, to hell with all these haters in the boxing world. I will see you guys later and more content coming soon. Thank you.